The avoidant bait and switch is nothing short of heartbreaking and devastating. It can be outright traumatic. Early in the relationship, this person's showing up as if they are emotionally available. They're showing up as if they're emotionally intelligent. They're having meaningful conversations with you. You have shared values. They're listening to you. You feel heard. You feel seen. They are making plans with you. They're taking initiative and possibly even being the ones to put a commitment label on the relationship. They're talking about a future together with you. They're making future plans. And they're telling you stuff like nobody has ever made them feel the way that you make them feel. You feel like you finally met your twin flame. You finally got it right. But then a little down the road, it's like a switch flips. And suddenly you're dealing with a different person. That rug gets pulled from under your feet. They've gone cold out of nowhere. They're distant. They're barely replying to you. They're giving you vague answers. That warmth, that affection, that's gone. They're not giving you those kissy face emojis anymore. They're hard to make plans with. And when you're with them, something feels off. It's like they're not present with you. And you are wondering what you could have possibly done wrong to cause this. What was so awful about you that they went from being completely into you to completely not? And often this results in an abrupt discard where they completely ditch you, give you little to no explanation or warning that it's coming whatsoever. You're given no answers. They're cold, shut down, and that's it. It's over out of nowhere. It usually happens between the 4 to 8 month mark. And if this happens to you, that bait and switch, it's likely that you are dealing with a dismissive avoidant or perhaps a fearful avoidant that leans heavily dismissive. It's not a reflection of you. It's not a reflection of anything you did wrong. It's actually a reflection that the relationship was going well. And this is precisely what triggered them. This is a person with a very specific set of fears, and these fears are triggered by healthy, normal relationship behaviors. Emotional closeness, emotional intimacy, very triggering to them. Any kind of disagreements, even small, very triggering. And any kind of expectations or needs that you put out there, extremely triggering to them. The reason for this goes back to this person's childhood. They received consistent childhood emotional neglect, growing up in households where you don't talk about feelings, and their own feelings were routinely dismissed and rejected. They often had a parent or parents that were very smothering and controlling, but not in a nurturing way. Parents that put very high expectations on them and only gave them positive attention and praise when they met or exceeded those expectations. The end result is a person that feels that getting close to anybody is unsafe because they learned if you get close to someone, if you let them behind the walls, they're going to reject you. They're going to hurt you. They're going to break you, disappoint you, and perhaps even outright abandon you. So emotional closeness feels extremely unsafe. They weren't able to express themselves, so any kind of disagreement feels terrifying to them. It feels like a fundamental incompatibility, even if it's a small disagreement about where you want to eat for dinner. They really fear communication. They associate it with rejection and abandonment. They couldn't meet the expectations of their parents or caretakers as a kid. So when you even have the bare minimum expectations, it feels insurmountable to them. They feel it's inevitable that they're going to disappoint you, that you're going to figure out that you're too good for them, you're going to reject and abandon them. So when these fears get triggered, they deactivate, shut down, the switch flips, and they look to create emotional distance between you and them. Emotional closeness feels unsafe. Emotional distance feels safe. So why are they able to show up early? Well, their fears haven't been triggered yet. It's the shared fantasy early on in a relationship with an avoidant. That's because it is a fantasy. It's a romance novel. It's a fairy tale. It's not a real relationship. There's no real emotional intimacy yet. That's because they don't really know you. They're getting all that attention and validation from you, so their dopamine levels are riding high. Dopamine is the feel-good hormone that goes off in the brain early in dating. So they're letting these bottled up, suppressed emotions that they've suppressed throughout their entire lives flow right out onto you. And it feels good to be on the receiving end of, but they're not able to sustain it. Because eventually the relationship becomes real. Emotional intimacy, that closeness builds, that's triggering to them. You're going to have some sort of disagreement, very triggering. And you're going to have expectations because expectations are a part of a normal, healthy relationship. And they find that very triggering. So their fears get triggered, and then they look to protect themselves by detaching from their emotions and avoiding any of the self-reflection, avoiding that core wound of defectiveness and shame that they carry due to the neglect, avoiding dealing with anything that stresses them or avoiding communication, just avoiding the entire situation and detaching from it. So they push their partner away. They shut down, suppress their feelings for their partner. That's how they've learned to keep themselves safe. But being on the receiving end of it is absolutely horrific because you didn't see it coming. You're given little to no explanation. They were all into you and then pulled the rug. And they're not even showing you any empathy. That's because they've suppressed all these emotions. They're avoiding self-reflection on it, avoiding dealing with any of these painful emotions or any kind of discomfort, which means they're also detaching from empathy too. When they are triggered, they don't have the capacity or the willingness to consider the needs or feelings of another person. They don't have the ability to empathize with you. One of the core components of emotional availability is the ability and willingness to empathize with your partner, to feel their emotions along with them. But when the avoidant is triggered, they don't really have the capacity or desire to empathize, which is why, one of the reasons why, they are emotionally unavailable. But it's blindsiding. It is absolutely painful. And if you don't understand what avoidant attachment is, it's so incredibly easy to personalize this. Because you thought you had it right, and now it's suddenly over. But it's not a reflection of you. It's a reflection of this person, their unhealed wounds, their unhealed traumas, their insecurities. And yes, it's a reflection of their character too. Because ultimately, when they're pulling that rug and just discarding you and throwing you in the trash like you never even mattered, no, they're not doing it for the intent of hurting you, but they are not considering you. They're not considering the impact and the pain that it's going to cause you. They're only thinking of themselves, and whatever they perceive will soothe them in the moment. So don't blame yourself. It is specifically healthy relationship behaviors. It is specifically closeness. It is specifically partners that really make them feel something because of that closeness that builds with a good partner. That's what triggers them. So it's not that you're doing anything wrong, it's that you're doing everything right, and that terrified them.